Oh, damn.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. This is True Powers Mine, and this is TPIM SR Live. Today, we have a special guest, y'all. We have Brother Gabriel. He's a researcher. I also like to take this moment to thank Brother Phil Fixico. Yet again, the hidden hand of Fixico is in this production. Brother Gabriel, you still on the line?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes. Just want to, turn it over to you. Let you kind of introduce yourself to the listeners and the viewers, and we'll just take it from there.
Cool, man. Cool. Well, for those who don't know, my master's is in American Studies, and my master's in American Studies, but my particular field of specialization was in the history of the Americas. I think when a lot of people think about America, they tend to think United States.
Right.
When they don't really think about the fact that the Americas include North, South, and Central America. And that before the U.S. happened to develop the North American continent, there were at least 3 to 4 of the empires who were here doing battle just to get the mainland. And the United States was developed over time in increments. It was developed by taking territory from other empires who themselves took territory from indigenous people who were already here on the ground. You know, we relied on slave labor from South America and Central America. We relied on sugarcane, from the West Indies, as well as, other resources. So we have to see ourselves when it comes to American history from a global perspective, because it is a world history perspective. And I'm a history buff 100%.
Now, would you have any information on the show? There's a lot of interest in the Olmec civilization.
There are a couple of books that come to mind, but before going into that, I know that most people, from what I understand, Olmecs are in the Yucatan Peninsula, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
And they have, a very extensive history. Now, a lot of people, just to be blunt, they tend to get fascinated in regards to this history when it comes to the reality of having similarities between those with African descent and indigenous people.
Right.
So when you think about things, the indigenous, like the Olmec statues, some of them have been called Negro and so forth. There is a movement of original peoples of the Americas were people from Africa. And that is, I have no problem for saying that there were intersections between indigenous and African peoples, at multiple points,
Right.
That is well documented. However, there's, and I don't want to insult anybody out there unwillingly, but let truth be true. As much as people in the African American or Black experience in America have been maligned, I'm also careful of having reactions that can cause further
damage.
And when I see people, myself, I actually have, I'm Afro-Native myself, but when I see people say, no, all the people who were originally Olmecs were Black people and we're the real people, I tend to wonder, why are you saying that?
Well, could it be for propaganda purposes? No, let's go down this road, because what we're talking about is the phenomenon of Dane Calloway. I've seen Dane's work, and he brings a lot of receipts and a lot of documentations with it.
Or Ivan Fatima, they came before Columbus. That's one of the more prominent works too.
Yes, but do you think it's out of a sense, Brother Gabriel, that we have no collective understanding of where we came from? We all can't unilaterally all point at one area of the world and say, hey, we all came from here, all of us who are in America and we're melanated.
Right, and that's why when I see these kind of things, personally, I tend to think, I get this analogy all the time. If you see a bird, if you see an animal that's flying outside that's Black, you'll be so foolish. Oh, that's a crow. They're all crows. What? It's Black as a crow. That's dumb. There are 20 different kinds of species that fly in the air, 20 kinds of birds that have dark coloration of feathers. And if you appreciate biodiversity, you will understand that there are crows, there are cowbirds, there are black sparrows, there are eagles. There's enough room of diversity in the world naturally. So even with the Native American dynamic or indigenous people dynamic, I can just stop and think, as much as I don't believe personally that everybody came from Africa, I don't believe that for a minute, but I don't believe in the opposite, that we all came from America either. That's just as foolish.
Now, why do you not believe that we all came from Africa? Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, when people say that, anybody who has dark skin has an African descent, I tend to say that was actually something that came predominantly from the, what's the term I'm looking for? The term I'm looking for right now is the eugenics movement.
Oh, God. Oh, God.
From the late 1800s or 1900s,
we call eugenicists anti-human around here. They're traitors to humanity. Whoever believes in eugenics is a traitor to humanity.
Oh, yeah. And that system is built on white supremacy anyhow. But there's also the sad understanding of a lack of awareness of human diversity. Literally anybody that had dark skin was assumed to come from Africa. And that's kind of part of the research that I like to get into when it comes to showing that colorism, before we had racism in the U.S., we had colorism that was brought by the Spaniards, literally. When they came over at one point, they said that anybody who had darker skin tone was Ethiopian. That is well documented. That's why at one point, though the Atlantic used to be called the Ethiopian Ocean, when they came to South America, there are maps that show that they labeled South America as New Ethiopia. And that was based on the skin tones that they saw.
So that lets you know there were dark-skinned people waving them on the shore. Hey, come on, Columbus, come and get a bite to eat. Come on, guys. They were friendly. They were kind.
And what's funny is that there were varieties of darkness, and there were varieties of reddish brown. There were varieties of caramel, cocoa, mocha. And here's the thing that people don't consider from a Caribbean perspective. This is why I say you have to be very careful. When people say, no, we have to all come from one space, we have to all identify. Prior, it was the Afrocentric movement that said, no, everything that has value is rooted in Africa. Now it's a reverse where we have to say everybody that has value has to come from the Americas. And I'm like, okay, what is your individual story, however? Because not everybody, I grew up being told not everyone black has your back and not everyone brown is down. So just because you had dark or brown skin tone does not mean you're an ally of mine just because we had similar features. For example, when it came to the British coming over to St. Vincent in the Caribbean, there were the Caribs and the Arawaks. The Caribs traveled through South America, and they ended up getting through the Lesser Antilles into St. Vincent, and they did kidnapping, trafficking of the Arawaks. Now, this was going on for a long time with the slave trafficking. Before the British came over and jacked them all up, bringing in enslaved African peoples who also intermingled with the indigenous Arawaks and Caribs, and leading to the reality of black Caribs and the Garifuna experience. They're not sitting there saying, no, all of us that have value because of our blackness have to come from Africa. And they're not sitting there saying you only have value if you're indigenous. Because those categories by default are systems of white supremacy that try to pit you into one thing or the other.
Right.
And history is not that simple.
No, it's very
simple. My background, where I'm Coromantee, my grandmother, she was born and raised in Panama along with my aunts and uncles. And this is why it's a passionate issue of mine, because I grew up as a biracial person, Afro-Caribbean, Gullah Geechee, and Afro-Latino. But my grandmother, who was born in Panama, along with my grandparents and my great-grandparents, her grandfather was also Panamanian, but he originally was from Jamaica. There are lots of West Indian, as we call West Indian Hispanics or Afro-Antillians who came to Panama for work on the Canal Zone. There were also people in the 1500s who were enslaved by European empires, like the Spanish and the French, and they were taken to Panama to build. They're taken to Panama to build the railroads, and they had multiple maroon rebellions where enslaved people fought back against these imperial powers and did guerrilla warfare. Yes. So my great grandmother's father, who raised her in Panama, he was from Jamaica originally, and he was Coromantee. Coromantees, if you don't know, were a tribe from Ghana originally, the Akan people, and there's also the Ashanti tribe, if you look that up. They were taken in slavery to the West Indies, Guyana, as well as places like Suriname, places like Barbados, Jamaica, and they end up, they were fiercely independent, they were fiercely rebellious, strong peoples, but they could not be tamed. And so they orchestrated slave rebellions across the Caribbean extensively, and at many points they won their freedom. But the Comanches, they ended up resisting and living in the bush, living in the mountains. And so my great-great-grandfather was a Comanche. Comanches also intermixed with the indigenous Arawaks and other tribes in the islands that were already there when Columbus got there. And if they didn't mix in biologically with them, they mixed in with their languages and their customs culturally to make something completely new. So, that being said, when I see a lot of people saying, no, your true roots are from Africa, as it concerns the Afrocentric movement, I say, I'm thankful for my African roots, but my people's evolution started here in the Caribbean. I have the right to be distinct. And the same thing goes for indigenous peoples who have said, we appreciate African and indigenous intersections. And for African Americans, they have to understand that they don't have to take someone else's identity wholesale in order for them to have a true identity. I look at African American cultures and say, we are an amalgamation of at least 3 to 4 distinctly American cultures. And we've been told that we have no culture. When I look at us and say, we have multiple cultures that we developed. In Mexico, the Afro-Mexican experience has a very prominent American experience that just hasn't been well documented because of racism in Mexico and the Southwest.
Right.
But we were there, a part of that experience. So when I see people say, no, we are not Africans, we are indigenous, I'm like, no, stop. You are a triracial person. You have never been seen before in world history, and it's beautiful.
Yes.
Accept that identity.
Yes. You know, I just got a side message. Could you please ask the brother to break down chronologically pertaining to ancient Israel? Were there black folks in the Americas during the time of Christ?
Yeah. That conversation. Let me see. I'll be remiss not to first off give you some books to check out. So let me go ahead and give you some good recommendations for a resource to check out. One resource I would check out is called, it's by Dr. Yuichi Koriyama. I believe I have his book on hand. I was just reading through it the other day.
Awesome.
So give me about 2 minutes.
Yes. Hey, on this show, we're so unprofessional. Take as much time as you like, brother. We need that information you got. Take as much time as you need.
Cool, man, cool. So the book I'm reading right now in front of me is called Africa in the Bible by Edwin M. Yamauchi, Yamauchi. One of the best books I can recommend on the history of how the Bible itself literally intersected with Africa, the Hebrews. For anyone who reads the Bible knows they started in Egypt. That's the whole background of what happened with the slave trade in Egypt. And I tell people, by the way, when it comes to the Afrocentric movements, I'm not against Afrocentric movements, and I am against Afrocentrism or ethnocentric movements that tend to exalt one ethnicity above all else.
Of course, because that's anti-human. That's traitor to humanity.
Yeah, you know how people say, no, the black man's the superior man in the world. I'm like, you do know that if you want to be consistent and claim the Hebrews and then claim the Egyptians and say, no, we were both great people, these are black and brown peoples you're talking about.
Right.
Well, this was black on black crime with the Egyptians enslaving the Hebrews. We know that.
Black on black crime.
I'm just saying. I'm like, y'all, I think that we were great in all eras of civilization, but I also know that we were human beings first.
Yes.
So I can't say, because of a lack of identity here in the Americas, I can't say only good things occurred. I can't say we were back in ancient Egypt. And then I say, we were the Hebrews too, and then keep quiet on the things that happened within that cultural narrative where color was not their focus.
Wow.
I said, of course, these people were great people. They just happen to be people of black and brown coloration, historically. But if you're going to exalt your ethnic group on the basis of being denounced because of people not valuing your ethnic group, you run a very dangerous path. It's going back to the whole indigenous conversation earlier. Let me put this very blunt. Let me even be more blunt. There is a movement that is out there now. I remember when I was finding out more about Garifuna and Kalinago and other indigenous tribes in the Americas, in the Caribbean, right? Caribbean indigenous. I thought, this is amazing. People said, man, I'm so glad that you know your roots. And they said, well, of course we're glad of our African heritage, and, you know, we're Afro-Taino and Afro-Caribbean. But then over time, I started noticing if you talked about being triracial or being thankful for the ancestors you have from Africa, from several African nations intermingling with the indigenous,
right?
There would be a lot of irritation. Some responses would include, no, we were always here and we've always been here and we never had anyone from enslavement, intermingle with our people. Now I looked at them and thought, wait a minute, how did this become a conversation about being a purebred?
Wow. Well, hold on, brother. Let's talk about this concept of pureness. All right. If we go down the path of evolution or even creationism, do we not have one common root that we all derive from?
Yeah.
So if that's the case, if we all have one common root, then what the fuck are we talking about? Pure this or pure that?
I mean, and honestly, that goes back to identity politics.
Wow.
Where people, because they don't have security in their own identity or they don't feel like there's room for them, they have to settle for categories that they do not make, to be clear. This has been a big issue within Native culture when it comes to blood quantum, when it comes to saying that somebody is not Native enough because of a mixture of some sort. At the same time, they'll complain about white supremacy. And that's something that cracks me up. I'm like, you can't complain against white supremacy while you're doing white supremacist antics.
Wow.
With the Afro-Caribbean experience, for example, I saw people that literally went from praising me to cussing me out and then saying, oh, you're just an African. Which took me by surprise. I never mentioned Gullah Geechee culture, which is where my dad's heritage comes from, biologically. And people said, we never heard of a Gullah people. Gullah people, for those who don't know, were a mixture of those who were taken from West Africa, from Igbo Jews to people in Nigeria, Cameroon. They were taken down to Barbados, and then they were taken from Barbados, along with the Bayesian slave masters, to Charleston, South Carolina, as well as Savannah, Georgia. Savannah being the home of the largest slave market in history.
Wow.
Gullah Geechee people, literally on the sea islands of the Carolinas, Florida, and Georgia, literally made a whole different culture. They were a mixture of several different indigenous tribes that were there on the sea islands, as well as a mixture of their West African roots and their Jewish roots. And so,
hold on, the Jewish roots. What Jewish roots do they have?
Like I said before, Igbo Jews. That's one particular group you should look up. If you go to First African Baptist Church in Savannah, Georgia, I was blown away seeing it for myself, as well as hearing it for our tour guide, who is Geechee himself, who lives in Savannah, Dr. Amir Toure. He has been in several documentaries on the Gullah people, along with individuals like Queen Quet, who was the chiefess of the Gullah Nation, Gullah Geechee Nation, one of the critical leaders. But Dr. Amir Toure, we were going through the First African Baptist Church, and on the side of the pews, there was literal Ethiopian cursive script.
Wow.
And I was blown away. I took photos of it too, and it's online if you want to check it out. But the people who founded this church were also Gullah Geechee people. And it's the oldest, the oldest still active continuing church in America, continuing black church in American history. But I was blown away seeing these pews for myself and hearing how when they came over, they couldn't tell people how intelligent they were, because if you were intelligent and could read as a black man, you were a dangerous person, and there were death threats on your life.
Wow.
That's always been the case. So they had to use symbolisms to communicate their heritage and to communicate to one another what they meant. Blue, of course, is a symbol to ward off, evil, in the spirit world. And so blue was a very prominent color, used in the churches, but on the pews, they still had Ethiopian cursive Hebrew there. Now, there's some scholars that debate what that language really is. Some say it's probably Arabic, which isn't a surprise because we had a lot of people from West Africa that came from the Arab world as well. Bottom line is that we had people that had Near Eastern, Middle Eastern origins, and they knew their biblical heritage. It wasn't a surprise to see Jewish tribes in West Africa, because the diaspora caused Jews to go all over the world, including Africa. And from those African spaces, they were enslaved and having to remember who they are, they kept their identity. Now, fast forward 200, 300 years, you see the same thing playing out where people who kept their identities are still being told you are not who you say you are.
Right.
But the people who may choose to respond back and say that's false, they are responding without any real knowledge of who they are. So what they have to do is say, no, anyone who's white is false, anyone who's black is true. And that's not how it is.
Well, when we're talking about the Jewish situation, Brother Gabriel, is it not correct to say the Ashkenazi Jews are basically chameleons who absorb the identity of the true Semitic Jew, which is a brown or black individual?
Well, I would say there are a couple of different good reads about that. If I remember them in the moment, I'll throw them out there. But what I would say, Ashkenazi just means you have, a European background. Just like you can be, for example, as you know, Sephardic. You come from the Iberian Peninsula. You have your roots in Spain and Portugal, right?
Right.
So, for many Ashkenazis, there were people, who were like any other camp. There were people in the early world of Israel who were Gentiles, and they became proselytes or converts into Judaism, and they were valid. There were also people that were Jewish, but guess what? They lived in Gentile territory, Hellenic Jews, and so they were considered not purebred enough.
Wow.
Same dynamic that happened to Ashkenazi. There were Ashkenazi Jews who picked up, Jews who picked up European cultures, and they ended up making something new, but there were also people that were never Jewish to begin with.
Right.
But they adopted the culture. And I tend to be careful when it comes to saying, well, all the people from this background are fake and all the people who are Semitic are black, because even in the as it concerns Middle Eastern, Northeastern origin, not everyone has dark skin. Many Berbers have dark black skin, but many of them don't. Just
True.
like in Egypt. The ones in Southern Europe, Southern Egypt, and Nubia, they're the ones who have very dark coloration. The ones in the upper parts don't as much. Colorism will cause people to try to make a judgment call based on how people look. Hence, when people say, oh, you're Ashkenazi, you must be fake, I'm like, yeah, be careful with that. But I will also say, because of what happened with colorism and racism in history, especially the Holocaust, at one point, it did not matter if you were a Jewish person. Let's talk about the Holocaust camps real quick.
Right.
There were Holocaust camps throughout Northeast Africa. People don't know about that. There were Holocaust camps that the Germans set up in Morocco.
What?
Yeah, people don't research that kind of stuff, but it's very well documented. There were Holocaust camps in Morocco and several other spots throughout Northeast Africa. You don't really see the images of Northeast African Jews displayed when it comes to describing a Jewish experience. You don't hear about what happened, except for the Ashkenazi experience, because that's what's been popularized in the media.
Yes.
Because of the Holocaust. But you don't hear about what happened, as I mentioned earlier, with the West African Jewish communities that were enslaved and taken to the Caribbean. You don't hear about, per my background, because my great-grandfather was born in Barbados, but his mother was Sephardic Jewish. And there were plenty of Jewish communities in Barbados and Jewish communities in Jamaica. Jamaica, to my knowledge, the book you should check out called Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean. Talks about the history of Jews who literally fled the Spanish Empire to flee into Inquisition, and they literally made a living as pirates in the New World.
Wow.
And not only did they make a living successfully as merchants and pirates raiding the Portuguese and Spanish Empire ships, but they ended up settling in the Caribbean and intermixing with the indigenous peoples there. And many of them intermixing with Africans who were brought over later on. Jamaica has the highest amount of synagogues in any nation worldwide.
What?
And people
Get
don't know
out.
that kind of stuff.
See, this is what I'm talking about, Brother Gabriel. This type of information you don't hear on CNN. You don't hear on Al Jazeera. You don't hear on Russia Today. You don't hear on ABC, NBC, and the rest of them.
You know, and I tell people, I'm not surprised that I don't hear about it, because people don't know what they don't know.
Right.
I mean, I literally had people, for example, I had people that would say, oh man, those Ashkenazis are just not real. I'm like, you need to stop that, because first off, when you think about Europe, that's really what the battle is. Europe is what you're fearful of because of the slave trade. But if I said there were black people in Europe, would you reject Europe too?
Oh.
If I said that the father of
Russian music was Alexander Pushkin a black man? Would you still celebrate Europe, or would you say, well, that's European, so it's bad? No. And these are facts. It's just part of the history that we're getting back, because whitewashing literally caused an erasure of our identity. So when people think about Europe, they don't think about prominent people who are European and black, because that history was literally erased in order to accommodate the newly developed racialized hierarchy that the slave trade led to. So you couldn't talk about how the author of Three Musketeers, Alexandre Dumas, was a black man whose father was a French noble, Thomas Dumas, called the Black Count, who was a threat to Napoleon. You can't hear about how the Count of Monte Cristo was written to honor his father, and that his mother, Alexandre Dumas' mother, was Haitian. You don't hear about that kind of stuff. You don't hear about the history of people in the Renaissance who were black. You don't hear about the history of Moors who ruled Europe for 700 years. And once that time came to an end, that was right around the time that others started to explore the New World. You don't hear about some of these.
Brother Gabriel, could you please repeat that information about the Moors for the hard of hearing?
Oh, no. For those, it's one of the basic facts is that, and you can see it in several documentaries in the History Network, several places that have documented that black Arabs or black Moors literally took over the Iberian Peninsula, Spain in particular, and they ruled for 700 years, influencing the architecture and literature and so forth. And that happened to end around the same time that the exploration of the New World started to happen. So when I look at anti-blackness, I don't see it as something that's benign. I think, well, if you had 700 years of enslavement and forced captivation, I wouldn't be surprised if the reaction would be to start erasing any semblance of European culture having to do with black people. Wow. Or people who have black skin. I'm not surprised.
Wow. This is what thank you.
Yeah.
This is what I'm talking about. See, this show is targeted to young people, Brother Gabriel. And these young people have been indoctrinated, through public schools to believe, 1492, Columbus sold the ocean blue without no backstory, without no back history.
Yeah. No, and you have to know it. Look, I tell people, if you're going to deal with the racism that is, if you're going to deal with these viruses, that's the best way I can describe it. If you're going to deal with anti-blackness, which is a virus, a very effective virus that mutates, you have to know how it developed. You have to know, for example, how it was that people who were indigenous Caribbean, who were described as having a variety of skin tones, some were described as having canary skin tones, which are lighter skin, and others were described as having darker skin tones, literally as dark as coal.
Wow.
When you see these descriptions and then see people literally seem to raise eyebrows, if you say, oh, well, my ancestors, were indigenous as well as African, because they have been trained to think that anything dark skin is not foreign to America, you have to know that comes from a place. You have to know that when people mention that anti-blackness has influenced most of our conversations and origins, that it comes from a place. And once you find out where it comes from, your reaction isn't to try to erase other people because of how you were erased. Your reaction is to understand the nuance.
Right.
I know Phil and I were talking about that at one point online, because I said, for example, here in this world, many people, they're open to talk about the Seminole experience and the Black Seminole experience. They're still not willing to talk about the experience of people that were maroons in the Caribbean experience. So Gullah Geechee, is now becoming a very popular point of conversation in many circles. They're talking about the triracial identities for people who are Gullah and Geechee. They're talking about the reality of what happened in the Caribbean when we had so much intermixture going on and categorizations that it literally became difficult at several points to trace where someone came from. As a point of fact, if you were a person in the Spanish Empire who was a Spanish noble and you had a child with an indigenous person, they would be mestizo,
Mestizo.
And they could be counted as a part of your bloodline. But if you were an African servant of the crown, as a point of historical fact, there were African servants of the crown. I would highly suggest people check out one book here called Afro-Latin America, 1800s, 2000 by George Reed Andrews. And there's another one that I'm thinking about that if I find it, I'll let you guys know. It talks specifically about the experiences of Afro-Latinos in the Americas when it came to the Spanish Empire bringing over soldiers.
Conquistadors?
African soldiers who fought on behalf of the Spanish Empire and were actually given enslaved African peoples, enslaved indigenous peoples as servants. That's not talked about.
No, it's not.
About that side of history, about how it was not just a bunch of light-skinned people that came over and did damage. There were also people who looked like us, who were the face of the enemy. And that led to some historical damages also that we have to reconcile.
Yes.
So my point being, when you see people talking about the Seminole experience, you don't really hear them talking about the Caribbean experience, and that to me always cracks me up. Having that background, I think, who are the people that Columbus encountered first?
Right, the Caribbeans.
Caribbeans, like y'all just gonna ignore us in the conversation and then say, well, you didn't grow up on a reservation, therefore you're not really indigenous. I'm like, but you didn't grow up nomadic. There are different types of transportation modes for indigenous peoples worldwide. And as it concerns the maroon experience, I try to tell people, you do understand that for enslaved Africans that were brought over and then fled into the mountains and did guerrilla warfare successfully for centuries, they literally made a culture completely new, intermingling with the indigenous people there. So they couldn't care less about whether you feel their indigeneity is correct or not. They're like, we've earned the right to do that because we actually are. Our story is that we were warriors who literally mixed in with other warriors here for survival. Your story is that you were here for a long time dealing with invaders. We have two different narratives. If I had to go Lord of the Rings on people, or to go further, if I had to go J.L. Tolkien's a hobbit, I would say, is an elf still an elf if they're a woodland elf that live in the woods and are more warlike and more nomadic compared to the elves that live in Riverdale? There were different types. So why is it that we can't talk about the different types of experience, because we all have to have this very limited definition of experience that never fits the narrative we're talking about? That wasn't the story.
Wow. I got a question from chat room from Brother David. Ask Brother David, one of the chatters, ask Brother to talk about white slaves we had.
Can you clarify? Let me actually, I was just going to one of my books. What I'm thinking about more specifically is the Berber slave trade that happened. Berber slave trade happened, for a long time in the Mediterranean area. And that was also done by the Moors. I try to tell people also, if you want to be more accurate, check out the Afro-Arab slave trade. They talk about the transatlantic slave trade, but they do not understand the nuances. And that's a big deal, because when people try to have false forms of solidarity, they set themselves up for danger. Right. A lot of people were shocked to find out that there were slave trades still happening in Libya.
Right.
Today. I can't believe they're selling black people again. And I was like, stop. Either you weren't told, or you were told and you ignored it. But don't you know about the Indian Ocean slave trade that took the other half of ancestors from Africa across the Indian Ocean and got us all the way into India and Morocco and Jordan? City Indians are Indians today who are Indians of African descent. Look it up.
Wow.
The City Indians and stuff, they're one example, but the Afro-Arab slave trade, these were people who had the same coloration, but because of the slave trade, that was what mattered, getting those slaves enslaved and getting that profit. And they were selling other people across the Indian Ocean, without any apology for it. That's why to this day, those descendants of that slave trade still call it out and say, your roots on the other side of the Atlantic started with the Europeans doing evil. Ours started with the Arab world.
Wow. Is that how India has that caste system where the dark-skinned people are at the bottom?
That had a longer history from what I can recall at the moment. That was there even before we got there, but adding in the racial dynamics to it, yeah, you can add, there are a lot of things that kind of develop over time with that. That's at one point why Gandhi, no matter how much people appreciate him,
he hated it, bro.
He actually did support he supported the caste system in South Africa because they had a caste system already in India with the untouchables, who happen to be people of darker coloration.
Right.
And that's why I say anti-blackness is a worldwide virus. It is not something stuck in one location.
Right. Thank you, brother. Thank you, Gabriel. Yeah. Thank you.
Sometimes when it comes to indigenous experiences, I try to tell people like I'm glad to know my roots. I'm glad to know my cultural roots, but I'm never going to forget. I tell people like, y'all, just because somebody has the same skin tone as me does not mean they're my ally or my friend.
Right.
I can deal with anti-blackness at the same time I can deal with the fact that there were corruptions within black cultures. I can deal with the fact at the historical point that there were several native tribes during what happened with the Indian slave trade, which preceded the African slave trade in the transatlantic. During the 1500s, there were several native tribes who sadly joined forces with the Europeans to sell out other tribes.
Right.
Western natives are some of the people you should check out.
You know, we had
slave trade. They ended up threatening several tribes. Several tribes were sent where? The Caribbean.
Wow.
They were enslaved by other natives who joined forces with the Europeans, and they were sent down to the Caribbean, my background. And then from the Caribbean, when the transatlantic slave trade developed, African slaves were brought to the Caribbean, and they intermingled with Indian slaves who were already there.
You know, Brother Gabriel, this is a question from me. When we look at the chronological history of the earth, where did humanity originate? From the Eastern Hemisphere, Africa, India, Asia, Europe, or the Western Hemisphere, South America, Middle America, or North America? Where do you think humanity in its infancy originated?
I think honestly, in my background, I believe 100% that we originated in the Horn of Africa.
Okay.
Which is interesting because I say Horn of Africa with intention. I say Horn of Africa because, you know, many people say Middle East, and I'm like, the Middle East is not how we always describe it. And the reason that we stopped calling it the Middle East, we stopped calling it the Horn of Africa or Northwest Africa, was because of politics. We had to separate the African origin from the Near Eastern, Middle Eastern backdrop. When I look at the place in the Middle East, from Syria to Damascus, from Syria to Lebanon, I see people who have certain skin tones. I'm like, okay, I don't see these people on CNN. I don't see these images on the TV, and I think it's not a surprise because these images will be labeled African.
Right.
Well, that's not a problem if you have a value for Africa. It's not saying that you're not, you don't have Near Eastern, Middle Eastern origin. This means that you also have an African root because at one point that was considered part of the whole of Africa. So when I think about ancient civilization, I think about the Bantu migration. You know, in Africa, I think about what happened in Mesopotamia. I think, yeah, this was a migration of peoples who are African in origin.
You know, Brother Gabriel, could you tell the uninitiated the significance of the Bantu tribe?
There are a lot of things we can share. What things did you have in your mind that you want me to attempt to share about?
Well, their proliferation throughout the African continent. What makes them such a strong people, a fierce people?
I think the Bantus are fascinating because they, for example, you know, they have a very strong migratory history.
Yes.
And I think with that migratory history, they were able to disperse in many places. There were people from the Bantu background that went actually into the world of Asia too, and became the ancestors of many Asian peoples. So I think about the genetic diversity also being a huge point of interest with me with Bantu people. But I also think that the lifestyle is what gets my attention. At the end of the day, I find it amazing that despite how other civilizations have gone through so much hell, they've gone through hell too, but they're still here.
Yes.
And they have no shame about being, as nomadic indigenous people, they have no shame being who they are. And they've also dealt with a lot of stuff from other tribes too, to be clear, but it's just interesting seeing their spirit. Am I making sense?
Yeah, you're making clear sense to me.
Cool, man, cool.
You know, and let's talk about this tribal thing. You know, if we could ever reach a point to where we realize we're in one tribe, the human tribe, that'd be a beautiful thing. But until we reach this point, What is the major point of contention, anciently speaking, between the tribes?
I think, honestly, it's an issue of scarcity and food. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't want to talk about historically. I remember hearing from one friend, his name is Ben Lowe, who wrote a book called Green Revolution. And in his book, as I read through it, I thought, this is so timely. What he noted in his book, and I want y'all to catch this, he said a lot of people talked about the war in Sudan, right?
Right.
Sudan and Somalia. And people have focused on human rights violations. They focused on the reality of ethnic cleansing, and we've kept it on that level of conversation, which isn't wrong. However, what you aren't told, as Ben Lowe talked about, was that, a couple of years before the wars broke out, there was a massive reservoir of water that was found to be underneath, I believe, Sudan's territory. And so, or Somalia's territory, one of the two. There was a massive water reservoir. And so in a time of drought, water is what preceded a major battle.
Right.
And that's been the case historically at several points. I remember telling one person one time with Indigenous studies, for example, that I don't think that people really get what they're dealing with when it comes to the root of wars. And that is human selfishness. I tell people, y'all, these people didn't just cross over the Atlantic just to kill people for the sake of killing people. They were looking for a food source and spices. Crazy as that was. They were looking for spices.
Right.
And spices literally caused genocide. Something as simple as, this food tastes spicy. What? That was Queen Isabella. Queen Isabella funded Columbus's genocide for food. And that's why when it comes to indigenous culture, indigenous conversation, it's a struggle for people because they're so focused on dealing with the cultural genocide, they forget your food networks are also a part of retaining your heritage. This is why I love my Caribbean roots, because we never forgot our heritage with our food resources. Our way of life as it concerns, how we actually save resources and how we share them with one another, because that's also a part of indigeneity.
Right.
Not just saying, I'm from this tribe, but how you live.
And how you eat.
I tell more people that, you know what I mean?
Right. Because, once again, each landmass or continent is actually designed for a certain human being. The food, the animals are designed to nourish your body in a different way than the next person. Now, when you come there to immigrate, you have to go through a point of time to where your body facsimilates or assimilates the nutrition sources in the environment.
Yep.
That's why we are so sick in North America, because most of the food we eat was not made for this physical form we possess.
Exactly. And no one's having that conversation about how we're eating ourselves to death in many cases.
Wow.
And even the conversation about indigeneity, I'm just like, guys, we can't talk about our African roots if we don't talk about how we eat. We can't talk about our indigenous roots if we don't talk about how we eat. I mean, honestly, I sit there thinking, y'all talk about how you want to honor the ancestors, but do you can your food? You know how to grow food. Let's start with that. I grew up with elders who had friends and family I lived with for summers where they would be growing food outside. These are people in their 70s and 80s. This was in Johnson, Tennessee. Now, someone can say, but they're African American, and I would say, what of it? But they're not really indigenous. I'm like, that's actually irrelevant conversation. They're doing something that is a tribal heritage.
Yes.
Owning land, growing food, and teaching your generations to come why you should have the right and the concern for having healthy food networks.
Yes.
That conversation is not being talked about in many spaces. It's also being minimized because it's going back full circle, this idea that there is something purebred we should aspire to. When we become how Africans truly look, I'm like, but you're not African. You are an American African, but you have a unique culture here in the USA.
Right.
What are you doing to honor your experience of your elders here?
I'm sagging my pants and I'm fucking as many whores as I can.
What's up?
I'm joking, yeah. I'm joking.
It's cool. It's cool. But you know how it is. I mean, I try to hold back on it because I try to keep myself as restrained as possible. I just grew up seeing, I've had people that say, well, the scholarship out there doesn't really value this. And I'm like, well, then that's the limitation of scholarship.
Wow.
I know my level of scholarship. I know my master's in American Studies, but I also know the power of oral history and keeping up as a folk historian with the narrative. You can do DNA research too. Thank God for Ancestry.com to show different things that happen, or AfricanAncestry.com, and going to the archives, the state archives, to do research. But I tell people, guys, even if you're looking for an idea of what group you come from, you have to still understand the customs of the groups you're looking for.
Right.
And that's the larger story right now. In a world where resources are becoming fewer and wars are being fought over water as we speak.
Right.
World Water Wars. If I don't know the documentary, watch that. World Water Wars, Blue Gold. Watch it. There are things like that are happening on the ground in the world of food industry. I mean, even right now with slavery, I'm just going to go ahead and go there. We talk about valuing indigenous people, right?
Right.
And I kind of crack up every time I think, so y'all talk about indigenous people, and y'all still refuse to say that Mexicans are Native American.
Wow.
I'm perplexed by that. I'm perplexed by how people throughout the Southwest, the territory that used to be considered Mexico, the territory that people of African descent fled to because there was an underground railroad that went south.
Not north, but south.
Freedom. What's up?
The railroad did not go north. It went south for a reason.
It went south. Yeah, it went south. It went north too, but it went south also to Mexico, where slavery was abolished. And it also went down throughout Florida to the Caribbean.
Right, the Seminoles. The Seminole Wars. Yeah, check that out.
Yeah. And Gullah Geechee Wars, what they call it too.
Yeah, the Gullah Geechee Wars.
It's funny though, because even with the Caribbean, for example, I tell people, y'all, you know that there are actually people in Bermuda who do powwows, right?
No. Who are they?
Yeah.
Who are these people?
They're Bermuda. I think there may be a Seminole tribe. I think there are several different tribes besides Seminole. I don't remember at the moment. But look up, powwows in Bermuda. There was an indigenous group in Bermuda that actually celebrate their indigenous roots because they came from the Americas during the Indian slave trade and also the African American slave trade.
Brother, the spirit's asked me. I'm so sorry for interrupting you, but the spirit is just in my head is asking, do you have any knowledge of ancient peoples practicing a organized religious system?
That's a loaded question. It's a lot. But yeah, there are several groups. You can look at the history, for example, in biblical history, if you want to go there, and talk about what happened with the evolution of monotheism after monolatry system. Monolatry, just to throw that out there, is a system of belief that there are multiple gods and goddesses, but there is one supreme being above them all who is worthy of worship. So think about it like a hierarchy. There's one particular being that created all the other spirit beings, and people will worship around the main being that made everyone else. And you acknowledge there were other beings that existed, but there was only one supreme creator that was worthy of all worship. Monotheism, there were people that believed in a system that like there was one supreme being, but it was like a constant, fight to the death and earned the position to be considered the supreme being of worship. Then you have monotheism that said that there's only one God and no other God. So there were several groups in existence that did have these beliefs, and even in the indigenous experience in the Americas, there were tribes that were monotheistic, that believed, of course, in the creator, as we say.
Right.
There were also tribes that believed in multiple things. So it's just interesting seeing how that history plays out.
Can you give the names of some of these tribes of each camps? Can you give some of the names of the monotheistic and the actual plural theistic tribes?
For natives, like in the Cherokee, that's something that's really prominent. In Eastern Tennessee, for example, they do talk about how several of the tribes had no problem when the missionaries came over. Let me see who else. Tecumseh. I'm looking for my book right now. I'm in my room, but Tecumseh. He is a very prominent person within Native American history, as he led rebellions and revolutions, up in the northern part of the United States. But he actually had a guy named the Prophet.
Wow.
And the Prophet organized revivals among their people. And this was before Europeans got involved. I think there were Shawnees involved as well as Delawares. I don't want to misspeak on that, but I would definitely say there's a book. Let me go look up right now on my computer.
Okay. We are so blessed, Yao, to have this man with so much knowledge.
I hope I'm making sense. I'm trying to be as streamlined as possible with the information because there's so much. But let me go. One of the organizations I help to facilitate is called Indigenous and African Healing. And it's a Facebook group. And what we do is we try to give people space just to come together, you know?
Right. A safe space.
Basically recognize how decolonializing ourselves, it's called ancestral indigenous healing, decolonializing for natives and Africans. And our whole focus is helping people understand that it's not about either or. It's not Africans are better than natives or natives are better than Africans, or that there's no room for people that are both, you know? Because we want to find ways to bring people together where we can celebrate our mutual heritage. So on that website, I try to bring some of the solid resources that I, you know, go through for my research, the books I'm reading and so forth, and trying to find some of them right now, actually, in my photo albums. And yes, I did find my photo album. Here we go. So the book I'm going to recommend to people is called Tecumseh Alive. Tecumseh Alive deals specifically with the religious background and the social background of Tecumseh.
Could you spell that name for us, brother?
Tecumseh. Tecumseh.
Okay.
And, you know, whether it be for the Ojibwa background, the Seneca, Kickapoo, Ottawas, and further, you know, up north, Tecumseh was a huge revolutionary hero who brought people together. And I'm looking right now for, where is it? I think it's this. The book is really powerful. It talks about the history of the Shawnee war chiefs, you know, and what happened when it came to their gathering. I'm also, I also appreciate this book that we learned about during my master's, because in the book we got to see how natives were not monolithic. It wasn't like the natives all one happy people. That'd be dishonoring their humanity.
Right.
They were diverse people, and they had fights, and they had skirmishes too, and they had disagreements. They were just as human. They had chiefs that sold out to the enemy. They had chiefs that said we should fight back. They had prophets that said the Great Spirit has commanded us to come together and join forces, you know. And it was just a fascinating time. I think. Do you have any questions in the meanwhile, by the way?
I'm blown. I mean, my mind is just so racing with so much, because I'm trying to put this all chronologically in perspective to the world's chronological events. Like what we're talking about, you know, the civilization of China was still popping off. What we've been talking about, you had all the nomadic tribes in Germania. You had the tribes in ancient Zimbabwe. You know, all these people were doing their things. And the one chronological line they try to give us in school, it makes it seems like a lot of the things that we are talking about right now did not even occur.
Yeah. And there's a lot of re-education that happens. It's kind of like, by the way, here's something to read, by the way, when it comes to the monotheism that was present in Tecumseh. It's on page 255 of the book, you know. At one point, it was noted that, you know, the Great Spirit was very important in their culture. You know, it says, and there was a prophecy that said the reason why white Europeans are winning was because the Great Spirit was anointed that whites would have been given a home beyond the great waters to see the land of the Indians. Brothers, that Tecumseh, referring to the earthquakes that happened around that time, because the Great Spirit is angry with our enemies. He speaks in thunder, and the earth swallows up villages and drinks up the Mississippi. The great waters will cover their lowlands. Their corn cannot grow, and the Great Spirit will sweep those who escape the hills of this earth with his terrible breath. These people, from their monotheistic view, you know, believe that it was upon them to fight back if they're going to honor their creator.
Right.
And actually, again, had prophets. They had people that said that it's time for revival, but a revival that centered Indian people. And that's what it meant, you know, for them to truly honor their creator. So it's interesting when you see that kind of perspective.
Yes. You know, when I lived in California, I had an interesting conversation with a Hispanic lady that understood her culture. You know, she told me about their creation story. The people came out of the cave. The spirit told them to keep walking until you come across the area where there's a body of water, and in the middle of the water there's a little island, and on this island there will be a eagle eating a bird in a tree. And they wandered around. That's where they found Mexico City, and they built that up upon that island. All right. When we look at all these different mythos about the creation, it's always someone coming out of almost a apocalyptic scenario that we would understand, like a nuclear war. A nuclear war happens. We have people in bunkers, okay, underground. After it's safe to kind of come out, the radiation levels drop to, kind of normal. They come out, the lands of wilderness, from all the destruction. And we see this time and time again in different mythos. I guess my question is to you, Brother Gabriel. Do you think there was ever a point in time where humanity was quite literally more advanced than we are today?
I think so. I think that, that will take more research to really solidify that point on this radio show than what's available right now. I think it's out there, of course. You're going to see things that still don't make sense to us today. I think, for example, there are designs in places near the Andes, if I'm not mistaken, these patterns that when you look down from the mountains, they're perfect symmetrical shapes of different animal creatures. And I've seen people say that there is no way that these things could have been made without seeing from above what it looked like. Either they were getting help or something else was going on that we don't know about. I don't think for an instant that humanity was less advanced than we are today. I think in some ways we're catching back up to what used to happen.
Right. I mean, is that the reason why when we look at, even we call them witch doctors or shamans, right? We look at some of the knowledge that they have. They can literally go out into your front yard, pick a herb, and it will cure your illness for your body. Do you think that knowledge might have came from ancient, I guess, scientists that knew there are chemicals or compounds within the environment to help nourish and fortify these physical fleshly bodies we have?
Well, let me actually discuss that real briefly, because I think this is an interesting dynamic that people are not talking about. And what I mean by that is this. There are lots of things that were labeled as witchcraft throughout history that were really just indigenous forms of knowledge.
Right.
And I think we've got to be really careful about that when it comes to things. So my great-grandmother, who was born in Panama, in Panama, she's the one whose mother was, whose father was Coromante from Jamaica. And her mother, her biological mother at least, was from, I believe, Guyana. So she was a healer, actually. And she was doing things with herbal medicine and roots medicine that are now acknowledged in the world of science as having medicinal properties. She inspired my mom to become an OBGYN doctor, Dr. Paula Graves. I grew up with my mom as a single child. And, I make no apologies for, my own beliefs in God, my beliefs in a creator, my beliefs in Christ. I make no apologies for any of that stuff. I lived it. We saw crazy supernatural things that happen on the ground as people who live in lower income areas. But I'm glad for my great grandmother, who was also a believer in God. And, she, as a healer, inspired our family to do things in the world of medicine. And I find it ironic now that for someone who's Afro-Caribbean, Afro-Indigenous, I find it ironic now that people are trying to discuss the benefits of medicine from the bush, but ignoring the people that were pioneers on the ground.
Right. And that goes back to the hatred of the racist bullshit. Because your grandmother was melanated, oh my God, she's not as validated as, say, a doctor from Oxford. But all the pharmaceutical medicines come, none of us come from outer space. None of us being magically incantated into existence. It's all coming from the bush. It's all being refined or altered from plants or animals that are naturally occurring. That's how we know that this planet is meant for us. But the thing that kills us is our lack of knowledge.
Right. Yeah. No, and that's why you have to just be careful, because people don't understand. like, let me go back to what I said earlier. Remember I said earlier that I tend to shy away from a conversation about whether someone is purebred or not.
Right.
Because I feel like it's redundant. I see people who did that with Native American experiences, where they say, well, we didn't grow up on a reservation, we're not Native enough. And I'm talking about the natives that have to leave the reservation, and I'm talking natives that have to deal with racism in the reservation, you know. Or the people that chose to identify as African American because they knew they would have a better chance to survive.
Correct.
As opposed to being labeled as a native and being paid to kill someone who is native. You know, that did happen with scalp hunting being something you can get money for, etc. So, that being said, I didn't care too much for some of these stories about whether someone was purebred or not, and I definitely didn't care for it when people who were saying you're not purebred enough were themselves mixed. Wait, you could be Cherokee and Scottish, but I can't be descended from African people and Cherokee because I didn't grow up in the reservation and don't have the identification that you guys had. But my story was more nomadic. Oh, okay, well, yeah, I could be native, but I can only be considered native because I'm Seminole. No, there were several other tribal experiences beyond that. Come to the Caribbean. Come talk to the maroon.
Yes. Yes. Or even our brothers and sisters right now in Suriname, they are under attack by a mining corporation. They're killing young brothers and sisters as we speak right now to try to pull out those rare earth minerals that you can enjoy your iPhone and your TV and all this crap. Until we recognize none are free, until all are free, until we use this massive military apparatus that we have assembled today in the true nature of humanity, as far as going around the world, liberating places such as Libya, where there's slavery documented going on right now today, where there's 30 million brothers and sisters in slavery, from sex slavery down to pick my cotton slavery. Until we rectify this fault in the human condition, there will be no peace, there will be no justice, and most certainly there will be no liberation for us all.
Yeah, and here's the thing that I think is sad. I try to tell people I don't really believe, personally, if human civilization has taught us nothing else, I don't believe that we should be people that recognize utility. That don't recognize, I'm sorry, I don't think we should be people that don't recognize utility. Because no matter how you play it, at any point of civilization, there are going to be predators and prey.
Right.
There are going to be people that will find some kind of way to subjugate another people. That's part of the bane of many of the Afrocentric movements and many of the Indigenous-centric movements as well. That happened with for example, the movement I was telling you about, there was one group online. And I like that group. I thought it was cool at first, but then I realized, as a scholar, I was like, y'all have a lot of good research articles here, and I'm thankful for that. And I was going to share stuff and kept getting deleted. And then I realized when I started making comments about Haitians being just African, they have bought into a lot of anti-African sentiment because Haiti had a strong identification with Africa. So you had people that were saying they were proud to be Haitian, and they were being told, you need to go back to Africa, and you guys hate people who are indigenous. Never mind, Haitians have mixture with Arawak, too. Never mind that they're on the same island as Seminole, the same island as the Republic Dominicana. Never mind that. But, that was going on. And people literally were shocked. I had several that left that movement and said, you better watch out for some of this stuff in the name of Taino culture. Because this is not something that is reflecting indigenous heritage. It is smacking of white supremacy. 100%. And people who are Haitian are automatically just African. And people at first who said they were thanked for the Afro-Taino roots are now denouncing anything African and saying anyone African needs to leave the country. That's the white supremacist movement.
Right.
But that happened. And the Smithsonian, many of the people who were doing these things had the ear of others at the Smithsonian Museum. Smithsonian didn't really know what they were getting into because they heard people saying, we've got to recognize our indigenous roots, the Caribbeans, that we've never disappeared, that we're still here. A true statement. What many of the Smithsonian did not realize was the people saying that were not giving the mic to others that said there's more to be indigenous Caribbean than Taino, which was also connected to the Dominican Republic, which has had a strong history of anti-blackness. So you keep that in mind. You go to the Smithsonian Museum and you wonder, why is there no real discussion of Indigenous Caribbean? And why is it I'm only hearing about Taínos as the main one?
Right.
That's where that's coming from.
Now, do you think they purposefully do this, brother, to ensure that tribalism or, I guess, self-disunification will continue?
So yeah, one more time, let me make sure I catch that.
Okay, do you think they put out this particular brand of propaganda to ensure that people would not unify under one cause of purpose? Meaning that, you may be from Haiti, I may be from the United States. I won't work with you because I feel that you are in some way, shape, or form responsible for my ancestors being sold into slavery, being African.
Yeah, I really believe 100% that happened because, honest to goodness, I really believe that certain things have happened because people, at the end of the day, don't recognize there is a intentional plan to keep us not only from unifying, but unifying in a way that lets us celebrate the full extent of our diversity.
Yes.
And I think that's why people are shocked. They think that we got to come together as one unified Native people. And I'm like, okay, but if we're going to have our humanity established, we have to know that we are not all one unified. We were never one unified Native people. We had territories. We had battle. We had evolution. New tribes developed that didn't exist before. These things occurred, and there's nothing wrong with that. We can all acknowledge that we're standing against white supremacy.
Right.
We don't have to feel like there's one experience. If you didn't grow up on a reservation, that doesn't make you less Native. As there's the reservations with territories that were given despite how territories used to be more expansive. They were given in spite of breaking treaty law.
Mm.
And there are people that said, well, I'm going to take my chance not being on the reservation, and I'm going to live my life,
right.
in the Wild West. So I'm going to go to Mexico. There's freedom down there, as I heard. It wasn't the Seminoles that went to Mexico. There were several other indigenous people that lived down there too, Kickapoo and so forth, Apache. And many of them joined forces with African-American people and intermingled. And their descendants are, to this day, thankful that they had a new experience in the Southwest. They're not going to try to fit in somewhat limited definition of what it means to be Native or what it means to be Black.
Exactly.
I tell people all the time, I'm thankful for knowing our roots with the Mende, Mandinka, Akan, and so forth. I'm thankful for knowing about different tribes in African heritage. One of my good friends that I would highly recommend checking out is with Heritage Tours. His name is Akindele Decker. He and I are working on a historical project to show the history of the Maroons and African Americans in one of the counties in D.C. And I've loved hearing his research regarding the different tribes: Fulani, Mende, Mandinka, Mandinko. I think it's awesome hearing about these different African tribes that were taken to the Americas, and they literally made things completely new. And as we were talking, I said, he's working with Gullah people, Auntie Pearlie and other Gullah leaders, into making a documentary like the one where the one from the 80s, I believe, where people from Gullah territory went to Sierra Leone for the first time. We're working on that, and it's going to be amazing. But I think it's awesome that, as he and I discussed, we were able to share how you can know your root system, but that doesn't change the way that you develop in a different soil.
Right.
That's why I tell people, I'm glad to be Kurmanti, but people say, well, the Smithsonian talks about the Seminole heritage. I'm like, that's good. Do you know about mine? If you don't know about mine, then I respect Seminole history, but that was never the main story. That was a story that became the most acceptable because that was a limitation that people had, but it was never the main story of what experiences were for Indigenous Caribbean people or Indigenous peoples in general. Black and, you know what I mean?
Right. One last question, because we're coming up on time. But what do you think we can do to foster a sense of reconciliation amongst ourselves?
That's a heavy question. What I honestly think we can do is we can find ways to Remember I talked about nature earlier, and I said how dumb it would be if you went outside and saw something flying brown that was black and said, "Oh, that must be a crow."
Right.
I would say you better go outside and study, or you better do some basic ornithology and study the diversity of birds out there. Because these things exist to show you how many varieties we have. I think for Black people, for people and for Indigenous people, we have to start becoming students of diversity. We have to become culturally fluent and understanding how we each look different and how we're going to look different over time. Shoot, you see people in certain tribes that are upset at their youth because the youth happen to be people that, like hip hop.
Right.
That's not what the elders listen to. I'm like, well, the elders often get their things from scratch. That's not how that happened. Let's be honest and say that how things were practiced in one era are not going to look exactly the same. And I think part of solidarity requires us actually acknowledging the differences and experiences that we have and just becoming more aware of those distinctions. It may require some sitting down and, pausing before we speak, but we need to actually become more aware.
Mm.
And I think we need to have a mindset that is not based on scarcity. This is what I mean. Scarcity mindset assumes there's only so much room at the table. But if I acknowledge you, I'm taking away something from myself. I'm like, that's assuming that there's only so much food at the table.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason for that. Why not think about making more tables instead of thinking we can only acknowledge so many distinctions? Because if we don't get everything, if we try to get everything, then we're not going to say anything. Well, that's stupid. That's not the story of humanity. Well, if we talk more about we talk about anything besides Europeans, then we're not going to talk about anything important in European culture. Well, no, you can talk about the extensiveness of humanity.
Right.
Let's not be lazy. Let's actually sit down and recognize their experiences bigger than ourselves. That's what I think about that.
Wow. Brother Gabriel, is there any way, a listener can email you, contact you, maybe even fund your operation?
Yes. I have my PayPal. Number one, if y'all want to keep with more of my work, go to www.saved103.wordpress.com. That has more of the work I have done per my master's, working with other civil rights leaders in U.S. history, people who are good friends of Dr. Martin Luther King. That's part of the work I did as an intern with National Council of Elders, where I worked with friends of the late Dr. Vincent Harding and several others who made up the freedom struggle. You can go on that website, or you can go to my PayPal. I appreciate, and you go in my PayPal. Is everyone listening? Am I thinking too fast?
Yeah, okay. We're listening.
Cool. So my PayPal is the following. I got to remember it. PayPal would be ggraves103.
ggraves103.
Yeah, ggraves103 at Comcast.net.
There it is. Listen, y'all. We can sit here and, like I always tell you, this isn't like, some PBS special fundraising. But if you don't want to fund your own liberation, if you don't want to fund scholars who have at their core, and this man here as his core has love for humanity, then there should be no bitching and moaning when you get no liberation. There should be no bitching and moaning when you stay in ignorance, because all this research is not for free. This man has sacrificed his time and his life to research these issues that we find fascinating. And we can't give him a couple of dollars, but you have no problems giving the club a couple of dollars. You have no problems giving the movie house a couple of dollars. Hell, you have no problem going down there to the bar and giving a few bucks. If you have any problems funding this young man and his endeavor that's going to facilitate thought and critical thinking in the minds of the youth, then you really shouldn't be listening to this particular show, because we are about funding our own liberation. And we're about bringing on guests that you would not hear this information on Al Jazeera. You will not hear it on Russia Today. You will not hear it on CNN. You will not hear it on MBS or NBC, rather. You will not hear it on none of that. But that's why you come here to get fed. But in order to keep feeding you, we have to pay for the oats and barley. That means we have to support brothers like Gabriel. No, I'm just saying we have to. If we don't, no one will. He's not going to get a scholarship from the Ford Foundation. He's not going to get subsidized by the United States government because he's talking about liberation. He's talking about actually expanding your brain so that you can have the correct data to make correct decisions. Junk in, junk out. Good in, good out. That's how the supercomputer, which is your brain, works. And that's why propaganda is so profitable.
It's so real. And I'll join in and say this, by the way. Like, one of the places I work right now is the Prince George's African American Museum and Cultural Center as their programs and partnership coordinator. I just had a conference called the Art Administrators of Colors Conference. And we talked about the things that you brought up today on the intersections of cultures. And I tell people all the time, when people say, man, this is so amazing how you know so much, I think one of the most damaging things you could do as an individual is give your learning to someone else. I tell people, guys, the only difference between me and you, I have a good photographic memory and I have a pretty good brain capacity, but guess what? I use the tools that we were both given in elementary school. That was my local library.
Yes.
I went to the local library and I sat down with other librarians and I sat down with other teachers who shared their knowledge for free. Public education matters. The commons matter. And if you don't know where to go for information or that you actually can get this information as well, you're not going to be able to educate yourself. I go to the Library of Congress because I chose to get a research card so I can actually use that resource for my own research. And many people won't spend at least 5 to 10 minutes a day reading.
Wow. You know, you're up. You're kind of up in the Washington D.C. area, correct, brother?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now I want everyone to know this is my first time in life in human history. All the millions upon millions of years humanity's been out. This is my first time ever actually physically talking to Brother Gabriel. This is our first conversation, and we're sharing it with you guys. All right. I want to link you up, Brother Gabriel. I got an ally friend, Dr. Randy Short. He's in the Washington, D.C. Area. Well, actually, right now he's in Baltimore helping a future Congresswoman run for office, Rebecca Watkins, I believe. But I want to, if it's okay with you, I want to be able to pass on your number to him.
Yeah, it's cool. No problem.
Awesome. Thank you, brother. And do you have a YouTube platform by chance?
I don't have a YouTube platform developed yet. Most of the work I do is on my Instagram account, ggraves103, or my Facebook platform because I tell people all the time, there's so much ignorance that happens online.
Oh, God.
You complain a lot about that, and I tell people, this is the newspapers who put out propaganda. Ella Baker, Ida B. Wells, made her own newspaper source or got involved, and she got involved in the other namespace and said, y'all are using this to talk about ignorance. I'm going to flood this whole space with stuff that's true. So y'all want to keep with the work I'm doing. I'm on my Facebook platform. I do have my website that I shared earlier. I am working on my YouTube page. I have another page actually on Patreon, actually. I think that's the name of it.
Patreon? Yes, that's a good platform. You know, look, my whole thing is I want to get the dollars in the hands of the fighters. We need war bonds and war chests to fight this war of ignorance, this war on hate that facilitates public policy making. Because once again, guys, if we look back in history, before you kill a people, you must kill their image. And our image has taken a few hits. Collectively.
Yeah. And we've done, and I have to say that part of the image battle is that we've allowed, it's not to blame victims, not to victim blame anyone. It's just that, like I said earlier, sometimes the way we respond to situations are just as damaging as the situation itself. And we have to say, when people say, you can't, it's a common point. That's not black. I was talking to someone the other day, and they said, I just think you don't have enough focus on the American Black experience. I said, you know what's interesting? You said that after I mentioned that Black people love country music.
Mm.
Don't you know the banjo was a West African invention that was brought to the South? It diffused culturally in Appalachian territory, and then it ended up creating a life of its own. Within 4 or 5 generations, a simple tune became a popular hit in the radio. And you thought because of one image on the media promoted, you thought that because Black people were just urban or into hip-hop culture or jazz culture, that we had no bearing on the country music world.
Mm. We have a bearing on it all. Country music, rock and roll, heavy metal, rap,
right,
gangster rap, all of it.
Right. All of it. It's like we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
So, but we have to know that once you know, it's your job and my job to tell people, as you consider this, show them pictures, show them exposure to resources that are having conversations brought up. Show them grassroots scholars. I was talking about the film about this recently. I said, even with scholarship, understand that there are levels of scholarship that people can tap into. There are organic scholars and there are institutional scholars. Organic scholars like myself, we could get PhDs if we wanted to. Many of us have PhDs. But we choose to do our work among the people. We choose to go to places that are public institutions and share our resources with others because we want to have a people's history. Not just having conferences we go to where we're talking amongst ourselves with ourselves.
Yes.
And I don't live for that. I live for the people. That's why I'm a people scholar. I love going to the library. I love asking people, what you reading? Teach me. People they're like, man, what books have you read? I'm like, really? I just sat there and talked to elders. That's organic scholarship. I sat there and read books, and learned on my own, remember the information, and now I'm sharing that information with you. This is not my own brilliance. I am brilliant. God made me brilliant. Nonetheless, I value the brilliance of other people, sharing their stories with me so I can get that out there to others.
That's beautiful, brother. See, this is what I'm talking about. This is the type of agape love we have to show one another. We have to be our own support. We have to be our own educators. If you're allowing the enemy, if we were in Nazi Germany and this was 1927, and we're allowing teachers from the Socialist Workers Republic Union or whatever, which will later become the Nazi Party, to educate our youth, do you not think that we would be at a psychological disadvantage?
Yeah, I mean, dude, I tell people, y'all, we have the same situation now. People have ironically said we gotta have scholarship, but then I look at them and say, but you still think you gotta have all this pedigree just to learn or how to read? Really? Graduate scholars come to where you are and say, here are the tools we got in the classroom. Now go to work with it.
Yes. And work. We have to work. We stop being intellectually lazy, folks. Stop it. One of the sisters here wrote a comment earlier. If you want to keep a secret, put it in a book. No longer can that ring true with us. This is genocide I'm trying to warn you guys about.
Yeah, and it's cultural. Once you erase people's history, that's remember I mentioned earlier, it's something that people don't talk about, but during the rise of the Spanish Empire, they brought in Latinos, people who were born in Africa, people who were born of African descent, born in the Iberian Peninsula. You had African generals that were brought in and enslaved the indigenous peoples. Do you think they knew their history? No, they did not know their history. Many of them were so desperate to survive, they did what they had to do.
Right.
But many natives did what they had to do. That doesn't justify abuse. I don't care if you feel like you had to molest somebody. Abuse. And that is something we have to come to terms with. If we don't know our history or ourselves, we're going to do abusive things to one another, and it's going to cause damage. And we don't have to do that, but we have to take ownership of our learning. And we have to, like you said, support people who are doing this work. I'm thankful for my job, but I'm always thankful for people when it comes to speaking opportunities and moments of being able to give back as I've been given. Because the last thing you want to have is a caste system.
Yes.
I do not care for a caste system where we have other scholars speaking for people, but they're not really giving a platform to the people they're speaking about.
Exactly. And this is the yoke we have been under academically since about 1602.
Yeah. yeah, I'm like, okay, like I've got to talk to people like, we got to talk about the history of Black natives. I'm like, okay, but if you only interview people who were Seminole or people who were Cherokee or people who were Choctaw, cool, y'all still aren't talking about Caribbean natives.
Right.
Shoot, you're not talking about people that live up north, Wampanoag and Black. You're not talking about people. Shoot, you're not talking about Mexicans. And I repeat, Mexicans are Native Americans. I repeat that. And guess what? When people say, well, I wish you wouldn't have done what we did to natives back in the day, I'm like, really? Because you're still doing it now. It's called slavery. It's called a food plantation. It's called enslaving Mexican Americans to work on our food plantation for free.
Yeah.
So you can have lettuce and tomato, and then you think, well, they're just Mexicans, they're illegal. And I'm like, no, they're actually Native Americans, guys.
And you know, I don't want to get into that discussion right now.
You know how it's gonna go.
But
I have to say it. I have to get it out there and say, just think about that. You know, that's not in the conversation right now because we're not getting it out there.
We're not. And let's be honest. Just as eugenics is a plan, cultural ignorance and non-overstanding is a plan as well.
Yeah. Gatekeeping is part of that plan too.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
I'm not going to be a gatekeeper. I'm trying to get these keys to the gatekeepers and unlock the doors.
Hey, I'm still looking for the next true powers mind to rise up and take over this program. I'm old. I'm ready to go off and retire. I want the next young brother or sister to rise up, take over this program, the People's Show, and continue spitting this fire of truth.
That's real. That's the truth. That's real. And that's why I'm thankful for your show doing what you're doing right now.
And thank you, brother. And thank you, listeners out there, because this is a full circle operation here. It begins with a question, and hopefully, sincerely, it ends with behavior modification.
That's real.
Well, brother, I know you're extremely busy. This will not be the last time. I'm giving you an open door. You got my number. We'll conversate offline. Absolutely. But I give you an open door whenever you have anything on your mind, new research, development, anything. Come back on the show. Share. Brother, you are a fountain of knowledge. And there's so many thirsty men and women and children out here who needs to take a drink from your fountain, brother.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you for the opportunity, man. The blessings, bro. It's been a privilege, man. We know part two. I was just seeing this from LeVar Burton on my website. LeVar Burton's one of my inspirations. I'm telling you guys, I love what he said. After Roots, I spent 23 years teaching millions how to read. And he said before we were telling stories before we made fire. I said, man, I love being in spaces where people can be in areas just sharing books and reading and sharing their knowledge with one another and learning that that's part of us being human. So I appreciate you, man, valuing the humanity of who we are. Man. I appreciate that. That's how we build solidarity. That's how we change the system.
Right. And then you know what? If we look at it in its totality, this could be the point to where we truly have that unified people that we should have always have been.
Right.
Because we see the ugly horror of what happens when we're not unified. We see the oppression, we see the slavery, and we see the indoctrination to a system that does not have your well-being at its core.
Right. And we got to go the whole way with it, man. We have to tell people all the time. So like somebody, but still, I'm going to say, people think they don't have platforms, and they do have platforms, but they have to use what they got, and they have to understand what the platforms are they have.
Correct. And
they got to understand that this is not a matter of asking someone to help you out. This is a matter of sharing what you got and knowing that there's always going to be a system, whether you like it or not. And the nature of the system, it's the job of the system to be the system. To resist is our job. To stand strong is our job. To educate one another and love each other by sharing what we learn. That's our job.
Yes. Yes. What a beautiful, beautiful way to end this broadcast. Thank you, Brother Gabriel. Your name is reflective of your intellect and power, the name of a mighty Seraphim, six-winged angel, archangel, Gabriel. And just as he brings the might and glory of the Lord, you bring the might and glory of critical thinking with historical facts.
Amen. Historical theology. I'm a historical activist, my dude. That's what's up.
That's what's up, brother. Well, thank you, brother. And once again, I want to thank Brother Phil Fixico for linking me and this young brother together in hopes that we awaken another genius amongst us to share his or her story, his or her research with the collective.
Amen. That's dope.
Take care, brother.
You too, man. Part two, sir.
Peace. Wow, what another powerful presentation. Hopefully the show is giving you all something to think about, something to contemplate as you walk through your life today. This has been TPIM SR Live. I'm your host, True Power's Mind, the servant of the people. I want to thank you all, the listeners, the viewers, the chatters. As always, live your life with integrity, without hate, envy, or greed. As always, brothers and sisters, I sincerely ask that you be kinder to each other. Peace and power, unity and victory, dignity and respect, liberation. I'm out.